Hi, and welcome to CryptoBiography. I'm your host, Brandon Starr. This is episode 433 of CryptoBiography, and it's part 6 and the conclusion of The Spotter. And here we go. The answer came quickly. She poured coffee from a drip coffee maker into one of the cups. She took it by the handle, which wasn't nearly as hot as the body and base of the cup, and offered it to Guy. Normally, the heat of the coffee wouldn't have made the cup hot yet, and he would have had time to take the handle before the heat became an issue. But not this time. In a flash, he understood. She suspected he had heat vision and was testing him. He had no choice. The only way not to give away his heat vision was to take the coffee cup, scalding though it was. He winced as soon as he took the cup, spun, and heedlessly put the cup on the counter, splashing some of the coffee out. "Wow, that is steaming," he said. He looked at his palms, both of which were slightly burned, though not too badly, as he had been very quick. They hadn't even turned pink yet, though he knew they would. "Oh, let me help you," she said. She took a towel and ran into cold water. "I guess the heat from the pot must have made the coffee cup hot." "Not a problem," Guy said, dabbing his palms carefully. They were already feeling better. He guessed that the burns were not going to be serious at all. Had he assuaged her curiosity about his heat vision, though? He could only hope he had. "So, what do you do, or what do your companies do?" he asked. "The simplest answer is mercenary work," she said. That caught him short. "Mercenary?" "Sure," she said. "The government has lots of people around the world they'd rather have out of the way. Drug cartels and so on. Always out of country. When we get wind of them, we figure out where they are and take them out. And that's lucrative, I take it." "Wildly. The government pays, essentially, a bounty. Taking these guys out themselves would not only be politically tricky, but wildly expensive. We're the cheaper alternative." "Wow." Guy poured out the coffee and got some cold water from the fridge tap. The cold felt good on his burned hands. "Do you think you could be my new security consultant?" she asked. "I'm sure you must have enemies," he posited. "Oh, yes," she said. "I'd have to know more about them, what they're likely to throw your way. I mean, if you only operate in other countries, that reduces risks here, but still, what if someone figures out who killed their buddy and has resources to throw towards killing you? For this job, I had been going under the assumption of stopping robberies, thieves, or kidnappers." "I appreciate that." Guy thought a moment, then stopped. "Actually, I'm sorry. The answer is no. I left active military because I didn't like how I was being used. And I can't see myself joining you, even tangentially, in doing this sort of work." She grimaced. "I understand." He finished his water and put down his cup. "I suppose I should get going." "I'd rather you stay." "I won't be persuaded from my position." "I won't try. I'd just like to spend some time with someone who follows their heart. It's rare in my business." They enjoyed a dinner, and true to her word, she didn't try to change his mind. Still, somehow, he couldn't help but feel she was holding back on something. Perhaps she was going to inquire again about how he had managed to spot her in the darkness with no special equipment. They had fallen into a bit of a conversational silence. Night had fallen, and the room was fairly low lit. There was a lovely view of the valley, and it was not so light polluted as some angles might be. "Can I see just how well you can see in the dark?" she asked. He considered this, but not too long. He didn't want to seem like he was being defensive. He still didn't know how much she knew or suspected about his vision. "I don't need to brag," he finally said. "Besides, a lot of what I call night vision is training, careful listening, and so on." "Have it your way, then," she said. "I had a wonderful meal," he said, and rose. "Your place is lovely, and if I may say, very well guarded. At least from domestic threats." "Thank you," she said, grinning a bit as she rose. "There's more I could tell you, but I think that you have your secrets, and I will have to have mine." She walked him to the door and saw him out. He drove away, and she was a little rueful. She didn't often open up to people, and though she hadn't opened up completely, she'd been much more forthright with Guy than she'd been with anyone in quite some time. But perhaps she'd been too open, at least about how she earned her money. She wondered how his reaction would be different if she'd been able to tell him that, though she made her money exactly as she had said, plus a lot of investments, her real work was now trying to rid the world of people like her who did nothing but harm. Would he have believed her? Would he then have felt comfortable joining her? She'd have to think about whether it was worth reaching out to him again in the future. And she was still curious about how he had managed to spot her that night. And that's the end of the story. So I hope you've enjoyed it. I enjoyed writing this, and it was a little tricky to write. As I've mentioned in a couple of the previous episodes, this is part of the Connections continuity, but secretly, and maybe you figured it out ahead of time, possibly, but this is also part of the situational awareness continuity. So this is actually a crossover story with people, or aspects of both of the Connections continuity, which is sort of a magical realism world where it's basically modern day, except some people have superpowers, often to horrific effects. Sometimes those stories end up being either Twilight Zone-y or horror movie-ish, horror story-ish. Some of which the superpowers are much more benign or even helpful, as in the case of Guys. And then, of course, there's the situational awareness stories where we have this sort of like, you could call her a super spy or whatever you want to call her, but exceptionally well-trained individual who goes in and has started killing a bunch of people that she feels would rather, should not be in society, and she would rather have them be gone. And we've seen several of those stories as well. Anyway, so a couple things to say about that. So first of all, I'm going to have to, if you've been watching this on the YouTube version, it was only showing the Connections continuity, and now I'm going to have to go back and actually add in the situational awareness aspect to the previous episodes, so that if someone does a search for situational awareness stories, it will actually show up. But I didn't want to do that right away because I was holding back on the fact that this was in fact an actual crossover of the two different story worlds that I have written in modern times. And I have other story worlds as well, and single stories that are just their own thing as well. It's all good. So a couple other things to say about this. One is that I do, characters and events are fictional, fictionalized, or satirical. In the case of Guy, he's partly based on a guy I knew. And I still miss him. He was a good friend of mine in middle school and the early part of high school. And he had I actually couldn't find anything about him on Google because he died such a long time ago. It was before the internet had sort of taken off. So I can't even find like records, of him. I'm sure I could if I went to like the right, governmental databases or that sort of thing. But in terms of a casual Google search, I couldn't find anything on him. Anyway, he had a similar name to Guy Troyer's name. It's kind of a reversal thing. But anyway, it doesn't really matter. So I'll leave that part of it alone. In terms of his personality and stuff, I sort of tried to make it like him, but he was young then, and also the story sort of demanded a certain sort of characteristics. I'm not sure how accurate that part is. In my head, he looks like the guy I knew, but but you can't really bring that across in writing very, very easily, in terms of unless you're going to get into every last detail about someone's face or something, which is something I don't really do in my stories. It's rarely necessary to the story, and it's distracting to try. But yeah, he was a friend of mine. He was basically probably my closest friend for at least a good year. And right before it turns out he moved away, and then like he had been gone for a year, and I think I'd just started college when word came back to me that he had died. He liked to listen to music on his Walkman. Apparently, he, was walking down the train tracks and just wasn't paying attention, and just that was it. And it was a real, it really kicked my ass when I heard it, and I was so shocked. And it had been a little while since we'd, seen each other, and we'd exchanged a couple of letters, but teenage guys, we had done like one letter back and forth, and or maybe two, and then it sort of stopped because that's just high school kids back then. We just weren't good letter writers. So we did, communicate a little bit, and then he was just gone, and and I wasn't getting a letter from him, and I hadn't thought to write him back either. And but it turns out he had died. Anyway, I don't know if this is an honor to him exactly. But I'm thinking of him, and he was a good guy. And yeah. So anyway, so while this, characters and events are fictional, fictionalized or satirical, this one is very much in the camp of fictionalized. Like, he's obviously he didn't have superhero abilities, to my knowledge. And because he had just become an adult, he hadn't, gone into the military or anything like that. I don't think, as far as I know. I'm pretty sure he hadn't. And so it's all very fictionalized. It's mostly just his name that's actually sort of similar to the friend that I had. Anyway, enough blathering on. I still miss him sometimes. He would have been interesting to see what he had done with his life if he hadn't made that dreadful mistake. Anyway. So thank you for listening. If you have any comments or questions about this episode or previous episodes, CryptoBiography@gmail.com, or hit us up on Facebook or Blue Sky. And thanks for listening. Words and music copyright 2025, Brandon Starr, all rights reserved. Characters and events are fictional, fictionalized, or satirical.